Hi, I'm Corey.
Hi, I'm Tess.
Welcome to A Lovely Place.
We're so glad you've joined us as we invite Jesus into the midst of our lives, learning, and laughter.
We hope this podcast can encourage your heart and make you smile today.
Hi, Tess. Hello, Corey. It's nice to see you today. It feels nice to get back to recording. We've only been on a break for a week, but it feels like a lot.
Yes, a lot of life has happened in between. It feels like what? That was only a week ago?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is good because we're talking about mom life and working moms and all the ands today in Heather's book. So I think that fits in quite nicely with hashtag real life.
Yes.
Here we go. Buckle up, kids. Oh,
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are talking about, in case people are just listening in for the first time, we're talking about Don't Mom Alone by Heather MacFadyen.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you enjoy these chapters this week?
I enjoyed them. They were good, and it was brought back memories from when Riker was a little guy, because the chapter of this, or all working moms, is chapter 7, and then chapter 8 is keep the candles lit. And so I was just like remembering that balance, and I think it's a question that moms and people get to ask themselves through their whole life, like what's the work-life balance, right? That's those are the buzzwords. Work-life balance. Like what?
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember going back to work when Riker was a baby, and it just was so hard. And I remember crying when I got there, and pumping at work, and that's like a whole other thing. It was like almost harder to go to work
right.
in that moment than not. But then as we kept going and then nursing things changed, then it was like, okay, cool. You're with your dad. Peace out. I'm leaving. Like, then it was a nice thing, but
yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Well, I think it amazes me how much judgment gets thrown around about like career choices for moms. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because that's never really a question for dads, like, or at least most of my experience is that it is usually directed at the mom.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, before I had kids, I probably had certain ideas about it too, that like preconceptions. And I think now, after having 3, I am totally tracking with Heather the way she talks on this chapter, that, like, that's between that person and God. It has nothing to do with me. Like, right. I don't get to decide what's best for people. But I think there is a lot of like this judgment and kind of like shame that can get thrown around on both sides of the, on any side of it, like people thinking you're making the wrong decision for your own family. And so I appreciate Heather's take on this, that we can be supportive and be a support network for the people, mm-hmm. all the moms in our lives, so no judgment.
Yeah. Whether you're working full time or because you have to or because you want to. Like, I think that's another thing too that gets thrown around, like, oh, you need to work for your family to function. But it's like, or sometimes it's like, well, what if the mom needs to work for her own mental health and sanity? Like,
right.
How that's not a one box, one fits all thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, how can we support other moms and be in the thing? And I feel spoiled that I have the balance that we have. I don't know, whatever. It still feels a little bit like tag teamy with Stefan, me working at the hair salon in the evenings. So we're like going back and forth. But I feel like there's an opportunity as Riker's in kindergarten now, and different things like this, like to try to figure out, okay, what's important in the new season and what does that look like? And just even thinking of what Stefan needs and what I need personally for self-care stuff, and when that's alone and when that's together. And so it's just an interesting mix of all of it, of working and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm making any sense. I feel like I'm going in a circle. What are
No,
we talking about?
I think it's good. So Heather talks about in her chapter, like, um, what will help my family to flourish,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we kind of touched on something along those lines with in Kendra Adachi's book, The Lazy Genius Way. She talked about finding out what matters, deciding
Yeah.
what matters. And so I think those are kind of in the same vein, like what would help my family to flourish. And I think that changes for different seasons. Or Heather even talked about, like when you add another baby to the family or you
Mm-hmm.
change life situations somehow, like that will change then what will help you to flourish. And it looks different for every family. And I think like what I'm realizing, as I journey on in age and also like going through, emotional health type things and learning with that. I think it's such a beautiful thing that we get to be Jesus is the author of our lives, but we kind of get to decide, we get to be the architect and kind of decide how we want to design and build our lives.
Yeah.
And I think that when we ask for wisdom, God will show us what will help our families
Mm-hmm.
flourish, because that sometimes I think can feel daunting to try to figure that out. But like,
Yeah.
I think we have little clues that we get to pick up on if we'll pay attention to that, and take
Mm-hmm.
the time um, to pay attention. So
Right. I think, and I was thinking of a different episode of the Don't Mom Alone podcast, and they were talking about writing down what's on your plate and honoring that, but just like taking
yeah,
inventory. And I think that I can't remember who the guest was, but she checked in like every season, like every few months, to be like, okay,
yeah,
what can we do? What can't we do? And again, like, not that she said it that way, but what can make our family flourish? But just like,
yeah. I think that was on
hey,
the Sunday planning
oh,
episode,
yes,
which
that's
was
right.
really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really good one. We'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah. Because I think,
Um,
oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Just that made me think of when Heather, when she was giving the example of different, like your inner circle and then your another circle and another circle. And there's only so much bandwidth that we have to maintain the
Yeah,
relationships in our marriage and our with our kids and then with other people. And it's like so that kind of helps me like, okay, hey, this week I'm really busy at work. And so that moves things around. Or this week I'm not. So I can make more play dates or whatever. Like it's like
yeah, yeah.
it has to change and I can't do everything all the time. Like there's just not enough time to do it all.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such a good perspective to have. Like you can't be all things to all people, and you can't expect other people to be all things to you at all times,
Right.
And so like to have that grace to know like that. And I think it's in the next chapter, I think that they talk about assume-icide, that when you assume
Uh-huh.
someone's intentions,
Yeah.
but I think that relates even to this too, that like um we shouldn't assume people's intentions, like, and if like as long as we give ourselves grace for how much capacity we have, we can give that to other people too, like, and keep in mind what is on our plate, who's in our
Yeah.
inner circle, and how to keep that balance as we work or don't work, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
work outside the home, work inside the home, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So um I just love, so went out to eat with a friend the other day, and we were talking, she's in consideration for like a new job, and looking for something that will be of, like a better situation for their family.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about the different options, like she's gotten a bunch of different interviews and stuff and has quite a few different options to choose from. And I was like, well, what would you pick if like
Yeah. If she got
if
to pick
if you
whatever.
got the
Yeah.
offer from all of them, what would you
Mm-hmm.
pick? And she was like, oh, I don't even know.
Mm.
And so it was fun because before she got to the restaurant, I was reading the chapter 7, and she one of the things that Heather talks about is values kind of drive like what we do.
Yeah.
And one of the lines she said was, when you imagine a good day, what does it include? And kind of just talking about like what brings you joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked my friend that I read that out and I was like, so like what of these jobs do you think would bring you joy? You know, because it's okay to consider something in the lens of what do I enjoy doing? Like what would bring
Yeah.
me, you know, be life-giving to me? And it was just a good moment because she was like, you know, as I think about that, that kind of feels selfish to think like
Mm.
which job would bring me joy and maybe I should pick that one instead of like, well, which one is the best situation for our family and you know, like all those things. And I was like, well, but I don't think that is selfish. Like,
No.
you know, I think that in the past I also would have thought that same thing. Like, you know, maybe the harder path is like the better path or whatever, you know, because of this weird, I don't even know what it is. But like I feel like God's just been reminding me lately like that joy and delight are like such a big part of our lives that we kind of ignore sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's okay to look at these job options and, you know, obviously pray about it and ask for wisdom, but like I think sometimes that's how God directs us too, is like what would be life-giving to you, because you're a better
Right.
mom, you're a better friend, you're a better
Yeah.
whatever when you're doing something that doesn't drain you but,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sustains you, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so um I don't know, I think it's just sometimes we don't use that as a decision
Right.
making tool, and I think
Right.
it can be a good one, you
Yeah.
know.
In Greg McEwen's book, The Essentialism, or Essential, is that
Essen-
Essential?
I think essentialism, yeah.
Yeah. He was talking about someone that was like, oh, I just want to retire and then I'll do consulting or whatever. And he was like, well, what if you did the consulting hat in your job right now and just didn't tell anybody? like just play to your strengths. And he started doing that. And there was a little bit of pushback at first. And I don't remember what job he had, but I just thought as you were saying that, like, isn't that how we're made? We're all made different with different gifts. And if our friend and if we are using our gifts to the best ability, then there would be more satisfaction in life, which makes us have more available to be a good, quote unquote, good mom, good wife, good, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
what does that actually mean again? Oh, yeah, read Heather's book. Like, it's
Right?
such a good book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how she points out the difference between calling and assignment. And she talks about another podcaster, Kat Lee, who, you know, said like as Christians, we all have the calling to go and make disciples. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't change. It's the same for all of us. But where God assigns us is different, and it's different in different seasons of our lives, you know, and but that wherever you go, whether you stay at home, whether you work from home or you work out of the home, like you are fulfilling that calling, and it's just your assignment that's different. But how are you, you know, doing that?
Yeah.
Um, which I think is so helpful, because sometimes it's like we wonder, well, what am I called to? Well, what you're called to stays the same, but you
Yeah.
know, where you're moving in and out in your life is different. So,
Definitely so.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought the next chapter was good. I found it interesting. So this next chapter is about your relationship with your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, oh goodness. Have you ever run into where you have different parenting techniques
No,
or
no,
anything like
I don't
that
know what
than
you're
your
talking
spouse?
about. Yes, of course we have. And it's interesting to figure out that dance of what we're doing and what is a mountain and through a few trials and errors, usually it was around the dinner table.
Yeah.
Things everyone's a little bit tired at that time, right? And then things can escalate faster than maybe on a Saturday morning when everybody's not as tired. But
Yeah.
so Stefan and I have learned to ask each other, like, is this a mountain? Like, it's our like a little way of like pausing, like, okay, where's our energy level? Where is this the most important value right now? Or we just need to have some, is this a teachable moment or is this a moment we need to say 5 seconds and then move on? Like,
Yes.
So I appreciate that through trial and error, we've found that just that little question of, is this a mountain?
Yeah.
We can kind of
That's
check in with
good.
each other because you can't read each other's mind.
Right? Oh, I'm glad though. I don't think I'd want to do that. I don't want people to read my mind either.
No, definitely not.
Oh, um, so one of the things that she talks about in this chapter is connection points and like
Mm-hmm.
regular connection points with your spouse. And I will admit, I have found that to be a hard one. It feels like sometimes life just gets so busy around me. So I want to be more intentional and better about planning those connection points instead of
Yeah,
just hoping that they come in the moment, which they usually don't. So
right. Yeah, I was trying to encourage myself, like, okay, we just need to plan more things right now just because we need some guidelines of, and I think that would build like if a date night, or even if just like, hey, we're gonna play a game tonight or we're gonna watch a show, because sometimes I just don't want to stare at the TV anymore. It's like I feel like I'm not connecting at
right.
all, and it's like, okay, well, so that's been nice. And then I'm challenged in this new season. We live next to my parents, and Riker loves spending time with them. So then that means we could have more date nights. And hey, maybe even we could go overnight somewhere. So I'm trying to be intentional and plan ahead so then everybody's on board with the plan. And
Yeah.
nobody doesn't want us to have a date. Like, that's not the issue. It's just lack of planning. So I just have been feeling challenged reading this chapter. Like, okay, what am I doing if this is one of my most important relationships? How am I fostering that? So I just felt like, okay, Lord, help me to refocus so I'm honoring my husband and our marriage and his need for time for alone, my time for alone, even though that looks different, but then our time
Yeah.
together, like,
Yeah.
makes me think of that Amy Grant song. Now I'm dating myself. Hats, all the hats that she wore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think so. A couple of weeks ago, I was feeling just witnessing some relational distress
I
in
like how you said that.
in somebody that I know,
Yeah.
and I was feeling a little bit just jaded about just like marriage and relationships and things. And I like not because of Daniel and I, but just witnessing that. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, reminding myself from our last book that we featured where she was talking about starting small. And I was like, okay, so every day, like we have these little like micro decisions that we make with our spouse. And we can either choose to, and the the flip coin or the other side of the coin is that our
Mhm.
spouse also makes decisions, but like for myself I can only control
Right.
myself.
Right.
Like, so I can either make this little micro decision to turn away from him or to turn towards him, whatever it might look like, but I get to start small. It doesn't have to be big things, it doesn't have to be um those like monumental decisions, but like, so just thinking about that, like starting small, what am I doing today that is a little decision that just turns me that much more towards him,
Mhm.
and that has helped my perspective on it, I think, to be able to um to know that like it's not just some river that we're kind of being swept away by, like
Yeah.
we get to decide how we want to that we if we
Mhm.
want to connect with our spouse, and that
Yeah.
can influence the quality of where we're going together.
Yeah. And
So
it's not always about kiddos and the to-do
yes.
lists. It's like, okay, that's so easy to keep being on that rat race feeling, like, not that it's a rat race because it's our
Right.
life, but just that
Yes.
feeling of like, wait, where are we going again? And oh yeah, I like you. And I was
Right.
we've been meeting different families and having to be intentional about that. So sometimes it would couple dates and sometimes family dates, but it's been fun as we've been sharing how we met stories and different things. And it's like, oh yeah, I really like my husband a lot and I like our life. And so that's nice to remember in the monotony of all the things that you're doing over and over again. And It's like, okay, wait a minute. We had a fun start and we can have fun again. And not that we're not having fun, but just the being aware of the season we're in, I guess. And getting to do everything, which makes me think of the verse I wanted to share in Colossians. And it is in Colossians chapter 3, which is the whole book is good. Colossians chapter 3 is full of a lot of information. And the verses before, which one? 17. Anyways, they're talking about being kind to each other and let the peace of God surround you. And then verse 17, it says, and whatever you do, do it in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God, the Father, through him. And then it goes on to talk about husbands and wives and children. And so I just thought how cool this is of being in life with our community and in our families. And God's like saying, whatever you're doing, let's be mindful. And it's like, okay, we're honoring the Lord in this, and he's with us in all the different relationships. And I just was so encouraged by that. Like, okay, whatever I'm doing, I can do it for Jesus.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah. And he cares about all the pieces.
Yes.
Yeah.
He does. All right. Well, we have a couple reminders, I guess. People can find us on Facebook. And I wanted to just remind people. So one of the ways that you can help, well, there's a couple ways you can support our podcast. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us like on Spotify and I think like Apple Podcasts and all the things, the Google as well. Google Podcasts. But then that you can support us and help support the authors of the books that we're reading is by purchasing the books through our Amazon affiliate link. So it's something we're trying and maybe it will help. But so if you love the books or love what we're talking about, you can purchase those books through Amazon, through our affiliate link in the show notes.
We're talking about what you would be talking about.
Yes. And because the books we're reading really are great resources. And I've already been recommending this book to so many friends. And my friend Kim, she has read the book like a few times, I think, and always reminds me about it. So we're always bouncing back and forth, you know, like the different things that we're reading there. So anyway, these are great books, great authors, and we'd love for you to check them out. So, and then if you ever have a comment or anything on Facebook, we'd love for you to interact with some of our posts, and that helps kind of us, other people to see what we're doing and to be able to listen to the podcast too. So
thank you. And we hope that you find some love and laughter and learning.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
In your lovely place, right? Thanks, Tess.
All right. Bye.